everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Classroom Psychology. I'm your host, Cora. Thanks so much for joining me, answering some very personal questions. We received a very interesting series of questions from researchers in California. Wonderful to hear from you. More than happy to try to answer your questions as best I can. Let's take it from the top, shall we? We're going to do it something slightly different. We're going to take a look at some questions, see if we can't find an answer together. I'm sure we can find some answers. They're quite personal questions, but hey, I'm all for a personal answer. First question. Are you part of a religious community, or have you ever been? If so, did transitioning change your relationship to that community? I'm going to tell you, nah. I've never been part of a religious community. They didn't really want me most of the way around. Although I do have a friend who has recently been attending a church alongside a friend of hers, and she's been saying that church has been extremely welcoming and very accepting, and it's been quite an affirming experience. And I do think there is something to spirituality. I've just never really found my own. And I've been reading Sean Fay's book, Love in Exile, and she talks about the importance of religion in her life, and I kind of understand. I get it. I get it. But it's not something, and I've got friends who also tell me that I should be, thinking about spirituality because it's good for your mental health. And maybe they're right. I don't know. Maybe they're right. But it's never been something I've been particularly interested in. I do wheel my wheelchair past this church in the middle of town, and on a Sunday morning, everybody seems super excited to see each other as they enter the church. I feel like not that many people in my life that are that excited to see me on any given Sunday. So, hey, maybe there is something to it. But no, the only way in which transition has changed my relationship to religion is that the church in which we got married, me and the D got married, they won't accept us. They wouldn't renew our vows. Like, they wouldn't bless our wedding now. So, oh well. Where have you felt the most pushback? Can you provide examples of moments or incidents where you have felt pushback? I think in terms of being trans and transitioning. The first is religion. Like I say, the only pushback I've ever had is that, the church won't. I mean, we couldn't get married now, right? In the same church we got married then, because they wouldn't have me. Home. I don't think so. I think everyone in my life took a beat to understand what was going on. I took a beat to understand what was going on. When I was young, I had a lot of internalized transphobia, and it took me a long time to understand who I was and to be okay with who I was and to come out and to, find myself. In the beginning, when I was in college, I would wear skirts over trousers as a stylistic choice, as though, that is it. That's all I need to do. Turns out the answer to that question is, nah, it ain't. No, needed to transition. And even when I started to transition, the first psychiatrist I went to speak to, he described me as kind of androgynous stroke feminine. He never really had a good sense of who I was. So even there, even when I was transitioning, I still didn't really know who I fully was. So it took everyone else a bit as it took me a bit. And the only things, in terms of, I realize we'll come to friends. But I think a lot of people had concerns that I was doing something to Kaz in transitioning, and were concerned for her. And that, I think, created some barriers to transition. It gave me a lot of guilt. And I think it took Kaz a beat to realize, as a consequence of that maybe, but also just generally, to realize that I'm not a different person. I'm the same person. I have a different voice. I have a different way of being in the world. I dress differently. I wear makeup. I have nicer hair. I have softer skin. I got, I don't know what that was, but I got it. But I'm the same person on the inside, roughly speaking. A little bit more emotional, But, other than that, I still like video games. I still like the same films that we get into. And I still like her a lot. So, it just took it took some time and Kaz realizing what she wanted, right? Because there was a moment where it would have been okay, and it would even now still be today okay if she was to say, you know what, I don't know if this is for me, because it isn't what she signed up for. Although maybe it kind of is, because in sickness and in health and everything else, like, surely transition is in there, right? Like, maybe not, but medical, gosh, yeah, loads, really. Are you kidding me? Yeah, to this day still, I mean, bearing in mind that in the UK, Keir Starmer and the UK government very recently responded to a petition saying that transgender people should be allowed in the wards. I should be allowed in the female ward, basically. If I'm in hospital, don't put me in the male ward, please. Are you kidding me? And the UK government very much looks like its clarification is going to be, well, transgender people, because Keir Starmer made the statement, transgender women should have their own side room. They're not going to get medical treatment alongside everyone else. They get their own room. They get segregated off because we're a danger to people, which I'm all fine with. Hey, give me a side room, Keir. But bearing in mind, I'm also a danger, therefore, to the coffee people who come around. So I'm going to need a proper cafetiere in my room. Also, the sandwich person who comes around with sandwiches, I'm going to need a chef because I'm a danger to that sandwich person. You can't expect me to eat sandwiches alongside everyone else, Keir. You're going to need to give me a private chef, surely. Also, a turn down service and a chocolate on the pillow, if you'd be so kind. And then the medical stuff. So GPs have no idea. I was in, when I first went to my GP, and I was in internalized transphobia. I had no idea what was going on, and I just sort of splurged it all out to my GP, and she was like, I have no idea what this is, but I'm going to send you to a mental health practitioner, In fact, the first GP I went to and she just said, I have no idea what this is. Like, it's not a health concern. Go home. So I went to my second GP and I went full girl, and I was like, listen to me. Like, look at me. Something is happening to me. Send me somewhere, please. And she sent me to the community mental health team, because you had to go to the community mental health team before you could go to the gender identity clinic. Why? Because reasons. So I had to go to the community mental health team, and the community mental health team said, listen, you don't have a mental health problem. I was like, thanks very much. Can you send me to the gender identity clinic? And they're like, yes. So I went to the gender identity clinic. And the only major barrier I had there was that if I wasn't girl, full girl, all the time, everywhere in my life, they weren't going to help me. And my first psychiatrist there literally said, I don't think we can help you. Bearing in mind, it took me a year to get to that stage, like a full year before they even saw me. Now the waiting list is years long, but then it was a full year. My hair's all over the place. And I said to him, listen, sounds like you are threatening to withhold medical treatment if I don't conform to your sense of what a woman should be. And he said, I don't think that's what's happening. I was like, I think it is. So I left, went, and challenge accepted, my friend. And I girled up as hard as I could in every area of my life. And I went back 6 months later to my second psychiatrist, and I was like, full girl. And he was just like, wow. When he saw me, his face was like, wow. Okay, so you're trans. It's like, yes. Hormones, please. Yeah, and so the rest is history. So the only real barrier I hit was like, if you are not a girl, if you're not sure that you're a girl, if you're not a girl in every way that matters, then we can't help you. That was the problem I had. Society. So this is actually a bit sensitive. I've had the advantage of being passable. Now, passing shouldn't be any kind of benchmark for entry to femininity. Like, me passing shouldn't matter, but it did. And because when I first came out in 12 years ago, I was on the course. Is it 12? It's more like 14 years ago now. I was on the course. I first came out as long before I transitioned. And I turned up on first day of my year 2 placement in full girl. I'd never done that before. I didn't tell anyone I was going to do it. And I still had a boy voice. Hello. And I still had a boy name. And I just turned up. Girl mode. And the concerns, the cat that I threw amongst the pigeons was absolutely massive. And I really destabilized a lot of systems that were just like, oh, we've never had a transgender person here before. And they had to work out how to have one because I was the first they'd ever had. And I was going to be there. So they just had to change some stuff. And we had some wild rides where local authority, who is local government, essentially, the local authority told the educational psychology service that they needed to phone every school before I turned up to let them know that a trans person was coming. That was fun. So we had to say, are you kidding? No. And then beyond that, we just kind of, I just had to go girl and live my life and try and do the job of educational psychology trainee and, go into all kinds of schools and meet parents and solve complex problems and try and help kids, and all as a girl. And one of the things that we constantly had, like me and my supervisor had these constant every week conversations about, how it was going and what we were expecting to happen and were there any risky situations. And we had a relatively, okay time of it. And I think part of the reason is simply because I put a lot of work in and I got my voice right. I got my appearance right. I got my clothes right. I got my hair right. I got everything right so that people wouldn't know I was trans. And then I rested on passing. And I was just like, me and my personal tutor, is my favorite person in the world, second only to Kaz, and my supervisor, who's amazing, and the principal educational psychologist of the service I was in. Between us, we were just like, going to discover if it's possible. It turns out it was. So yeah, lots of societal barriers, but I am fortunate enough that I passed. But, I have tried to give back because I know that privilege is not earned. It's just fortune. I remember when I was in college and my girlfriend then pushed my hair back and she was like, you make a pretty attractive woman. And I was like, you jokester, hope this doesn't unlock anything in me. So yeah, I got lucky. And I've tried to give back by classroom psychology, 37 episodes listened to in 30 countries now. And I've been on a bunch of other podcasts and I go around the country talking about gender diversity, most recently in Google in London. I was at Google's headquarters talking about gender diversity, which is pretty cool. And I've been all around the country doing all kinds of stuff. And we publish research. 15 papers are now published, most of which are from the Gender Research Group talking about gender diversity and LGBTQIA plus issues, QIA2 plus issues more broadly. So yeah, I try and give back and I pay for it. I pay for that giving back by Mumsnet has found me twice. If you're ever interested, check out Mumsnet, Cora Sargent, just Google it, and you will find 2 long threads of people calling me a man and saying I'm a danger to children. Spectacular. And also Twitter, of course, Twitter, X, has found me 3 times. I've had people on Mumsnet threaten to call my employer, and then I had somebody get in touch with my employer to tell them I was trans because I'm secretly a man. Who knew? Little did they know I had a 37 episode podcast listened to around the world outing myself as trans, as though that was a huge gotcha moment. But it did affect me. So society, the most significant, I think. It did affect me. It does affect me. you know, when that kind of stuff happens, it affects me a great deal. It really does. And in some surprising ways, you know, I've been doing voice training recently again, which I haven't done for 10 years. I'd let my voice dip because I've become increasingly comfortable. And now in this current climate, I know there may come a time, a legitimate time, also applying for a gender recognition certificate in the UK, because I think there may very well come a time before long when I will need to hide. And it won't be kind of like go into hiding. I just mean like, if I get an infection, because I'm immunosuppressed from MS treatments, if I get an infection, I end up in hospital for 10 days and they put me they're going to put me in a side room because they'll know I'm trans. But I don't want to be around and people look at me and think, oh, that's the trans person. I want to be around and be just me. So I need to be able to hide as best I can. So I'm working on my voice. With you, I'm not so worried. This is where I'm at. But with my voice trainer, hi, my name is Cora and welcome to Classroom Psychology. She would want me to do something like that. I'm working on it. What do you want from me? Friends. Yeah, so my friends, I had two things that really got in the way with my friends. The first is that my friends were very concerned about Kaz way longer than they were concerned about me, and before they were concerned about me. Most of them, not all of them. I had a lot of people like, they couldn't believe what I was doing to Caroline in transitioning, you know? Can't believe what you're doing to her. And everyone was like flanking around Caroline, circling around Caroline to make sure that she was okay. Very few people came and checked that I was okay, because what I was doing was very selfish. That was hard, but I had some really good friends amidst it all. I will say one thing that happened was that a dear friend of mine, he invited me to his sister's wedding, and he asked me to go as a boy. It was not, I was in the middle of transition, you know, so I could still do that. I don't think I will ever forget that. And I remember going to the wedding, and I remember the photos we took, and I remember being there, and I remember being the saddest person you've ever seen at a wedding. But I did it. I went as a boy. Where do you fall contemplating reproductive rights? Is this something that concerns you? It does absolutely concern me. Are you kidding? Not because I'm trans, just because women's reproductive health is a critical thing for societal outcomes, apart from anything else, but also for women's health. And as even before you just forget all of that, because it's just about women having the right to control their own bodies. Are you kidding me? Bearing in mind that trans people are all about bodily autonomy, right? Like, this is bodily autonomy personified, right? I changed my body. I have no testosterone flowing through it. I have tons of estrogen. I got 2 estrogen patches on right now. I'm an estrogen machine. And my body is feminized as a consequence. I am the personification of, you know, we are the personification of bodily autonomy. How in the world, like, I think more bodily autonomy is good. I don't understand how anybody thinks it's bad. I really don't. Legal discrimination of all of the policies that are coming into place, civil protections, passports, bathroom bill, removing references to preferred pronouns. How does this impact you? Yeah, listen, preferred pronouns is a bit weird, because not really preferred. It's more like they're just the right pronouns for you. They give affirming pronouns. How does this impact you? Oh, crap. In ways I was not expecting, it impacts me, right? Because I'm in the UK, and while in the UK, you know, we don't have a president who is in the last 3 weeks just attacking every element of trans rights he can find. But we do have in the UK, you know, in the UK it's quite different because we have a left-wing government, in inverted commas. They're about as left-wing as like the old conservative parties of old ever were. And they are they're so centrist, slightly right wing that they are kind of anti-trans as well. So while in the US, there's a kind of, oh, but it's Trump. In the UK, the good guys got into power and they still did it. So we are looking at like reform in the UK gaining steam. This party that's kind of Trumpian, populist, right wing, and our rights are absolutely on the table. So, you know, in terms of civil protections, in terms of passports, that stuff terrifies the crap out of me. People losing their passports in the US. I mean, that stuff is, you know, at the highest echelon of like concern. Losing your passport as a trans person means you can't flee. And that fact, freaking, if I was in the States right now, I mean, even in the UK, I have a list of things where these are the things I can tolerate and still be here and still fight. And then these are the things that mean I have to flee. And we're on the list. The thing right now is the Equality Act. In the UK, the Equality Act protects transgender people. If anybody reforms the Equality Act to prevent protections of transgender people, then that's the time that I have to flee. That's the time we're out of here. Scotland, probably. But honestly, there are fewer and fewer places we can go. You know, you can't go to Germany, France. France is a good idea. Can't go to Italy now, Canada, you know, Spain, Scotland. I think probably the best, safest places like Australia, New Zealand, France. I mean, live in the mountains. I don't know. There aren't that many places that are not falling to right-wing populism and anti-trans. How the hell, you know, so that's how it affects me. So it affects me like in a kind of, oh no, you know, existential kind of sense. But that's the kind of predictable stuff, right? The stuff that I wasn't expecting is like, I'm really conscious of my voice right now. Like, I wasn't expecting to feel so conscious of my voice, but I am. I just suddenly like, I'm suddenly, you know, I'm just really conscious of it. You know, I just like, oh, like I don't sound right. And I don't speak in the toilets and I don't speak that much in public in earshot of people. And I'm more reluctant to do that kind of. And I think because I just worried about getting clocked. So I'm doing voice training. I'm doing voice training. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm doing voice training to try to hide in plain sight just a little bit better. And it's that kind of insidious, you know, like I feel like I need to wear makeup more often. I dress up a little bit more. I'm more conscious of everything because I feel like hiding in plain sight is now my best protection. And all of that makes me feel freaking awful because there are a bunch of people who can't hide in plain sight for one reason or another. And I just feel like I'm betraying them by hiding. Which is why I have a podcast, because then I'm not always hiding and I am doing something. And other questions I haven't asked that are relevant. There's a lot of focus on dysphoria in the literature and in the media about like trans people experiencing gender dysphoria and therefore needing all of the love in the world to feel better about their dysphoria. This focus on negativity, this focus on dysphoria misses something really critical, which is that on the other side of all this, there is joy, there is euphoria, there is authenticity and love and connection and a kinship of the defiant, of people who live defiantly. And some of my most favored relationships, I got a friend in Scotland who's trans. I was interviewed by Ashley from What the Trans, who's one of my all-time favorite people. Just was so much fun for the MS Society. We were interviewed. So we got into a conversation together. It's one of my favorite things. Check it out. The MS Society in the UK podcast, video podcast. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done. And we talked about this. Like there's, you know, when you meet other people that are at this kind of weird place of like living defiantly. Like Ashley and I both have multiple sclerosis and we're both trans girls. So there's a sort of real kinship. But like less authenticity and love and kinship and joy and euphoria, that shiny little gender breakthrough that is something all too often overlooked. Trans people thrive when we can transition. What obstacles have you come across or up against as you transition and now as a trans person? What obstacles? Now the biggest obstacle is online. Honestly, the biggest obstacle is online. Every couple of seconds I see J.K. Rowling making fun of trans people, which is fun, which is wild. And the only other obstacles are inside me. Internalized transphobia, you know, my voice is too deep. I'm going to be clocked. It's all internalized transphobia. I'll lean back in my chair. It's all internalized transphobia. So that's my major problem is, you know, this internalized stigma is what it is, right? We're doing an episode on internalized stigma next, that the more stigmatizing beliefs and views you get exposed to, gradually you start to internalize those so that you start to believe them, or at least believe that other people think them more frequently than maybe they do. So that internalized stigma becomes something that you have to kind of manage, which is real hard. Real hard. It's real hard. So that's why the voice is, you know, why I'm so judgmental of my own voice is because I have internalized stigma. What do you want from me? Have you ever been uncertain in your transition? Yes, of course I have. Early on, I didn't even know I was trans. I just went for help because I knew I was, ever since I was a child, I felt like I was a girl and I didn't know what that was or why that was. And it took me a long time to realize, oh yeah, trans. And there are two times that I have regretted my transition. Twice I have regretted my transition. They both happened while I was recovering from surgery in the hospital. I was in a lot of pain. It wasn't just pain, I was in a lot of pain. And a lot of discomfort from the surgery. And the concern about, like, you know, you can get 1% chance of getting quite serious complications, which are, like, real bad. We'll not get into them, but real bad. So, I was lying in the hospital bed, bearing in mind I was alone. Kaz was on a course, so she couldn't come and see me. And I hadn't told anyone I was doing it, so I didn't have any friends. My mum came and visited on one day and stayed for a few hours and went home. Actually, I don't think she even stayed longer than an hour and went home. So I didn't have anybody with me. I was on my own, me and Critical Role, and a lot of my transition has been solo. It's been a very personal experience. And I've been okay with that. Like, I don't mind that it's solo. Like, it's been a personal journey of liberation. It's mine. I'm not doing it for anyone else. I'm doing it for me. So it's okay that it's me doing it. But, like, I do think, you know, now I'd quite like to have more friends. I've got a bunch of friends that I message every day online, but, like, I'd like closer in-person friendships with women. You know, just friendships would be nice. I'm going to try and build more of them. But yeah, the twice in hospital. So I was, during that week when I was in so much discomfort, really scared that I was going to get a complication. On my own, in my own room, nobody else here. Although I did have a friend I met down the hall who was also going through the same surgery. We became friends. She was awesome. Although she had rooms full of flowers and visitors, and I just had me in Critical Role. But in the darkness of the night, when I couldn't sleep, or, you know, they'd get me up to check on me or whatever it was, and there were twice where I was like, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. Nothing is worth this. What is wrong with me? And then, of course, it was. And I've never looked back. What do you say to someone who may take issue with gender affirming care? Listen, it's about A, bodily autonomy. B, it's about joy, affirmation, authenticity, love, the opportunity to be yourself in the world. It allows you to breathe again. You know, the first time I girled up and I went out for an evening, one of the first times, and I went to this secret society. It took ages for me to get an invitation, and they finally gave me an invitation. I finally went, and it was this little room, like a village hall, and inside just a group of women, all being women, eating cake and chilling out and chatting. They had lived their lives and were living their lives as men in the world, but once a month they would go to this little sanctuary of authenticity and let themselves be free. And they were all, to a person, trans women just not able to come out. When I came home, I saw myself in the mirror in the corridor for the first time, and I saw a girl, and a weight that I didn't know had been on my chest or on my shoulders suddenly was lifted, and that's how I suddenly knew it was there. I saw myself in the mirror, just cocked girl for just a split second, and I just burst into tears. Gender affirming care saves lives. It saved mine. What do you say about the idea of sterilization of kids? Gender affirming care being irreversible. Listen, so puberty blockers are available to young people. In the UK, they're no longer available to young people for gender dysphoria. They've been banned. And in the UK, puberty, like gender affirming hormones are only available over 16. So you've got these trans kids all going down the wrong puberty, not being able to go down puberty that's right for them until everyone else has been through puberty, until they have been through puberty, you know. And the problem with that is that puberty, as you can hear, is irreversible, right? The changes of adolescence are all irreversible. So when you're talking about like the question of should young people have access to gender affirming hormones or puberty blockers or whatever else, you know, because their doctor and they have made the decision that that's the puberty that's right for them, there is the chance they're wrong, of course. But the question isn't about should we give them irreversible changes or not? Should we give them access to irreversible changes or not? The question is, do we give them choice about which irreversible changes they undergo or not? All puberty is irreversible. It's about bodily autonomy. Do young people have bodily autonomy or not? What happens to you, or what do you think about what happens to children who are forced to live in bodies they do not identify with? Would I still be here if I hadn't transitioned? Trigger warning. I didn't transition because I really wanted to be a girl. I transitioned because I was one. And I was being forced to live in disguise as a man. And I got married as a man. And it looked like I might have kids as a man and have a career as a man. I wasn't suicidal, but I could see how you could get to suicidal from where I was. I felt very much like I was an incomplete person in the world. I could easily see how you could get to suicidal from there. Would I still be here if they hadn't permitted me to transition? If they hadn't permitted me to transition, I would have found a way. Because this is simply who I am. And I would fight dragons with my bare hands to be able to live this life, to be able to be me in the world, I would fight a dragon. So forcing people to live in bodies with which they don't identify, given that we know across the world, throughout history, across cultures, particularly pre-colonialism, thanks Britain, there are genders beyond the binary and outside of typicality, outside of just man and woman, everywhere. It is simply a part of human diversity, and that we refuse to allow people to be themselves in the world. I think what we would see, if that would be the case, is more people would DIY and more people would die. Wait, have we got some happier things to talk about? Some of the pushback from those who question gender-affirming care: society legislates the activity of children for protection. Drinking, marriage, driving. Why is it appropriate to let youth make decisions about their gender when it removes their ability to reproduce? I mean, that's a reasonable question. It's a bit of a false equivalence, and I think you know that. It's a trick question. Drinking, marriage, driving are not medically necessary, right? It's unlikely that you're going to need to drive because you have a medical condition that requires you to drive. It's unlikely that you will need to drink alcohol because you have a medical condition that requires that you drink alcohol, right? Unlikely you need to get married for medical reasons, right? So the reason why puberty blockers, why gender affirming hormones, why gender affirming medical approaches are necessary is because they are medically necessary, right? Your children, young people, they also get other medical problems that happen to them. They can get mental health challenges. They can get physical challenges. They can experience like injuries and illnesses, and they need medical care. Like, would we stop giving them antibiotics because they can't be trusted to make decisions about their bodies? Given that any antibiotic or any drug that we might administer or any surgical intervention that we might administer is going to have sequelae, right? And it could have side effects, and it could have unintended consequences, and you might come to regret it. But would we take those away? No. Why not? Because they're medically necessary. They save lives. And the reason why we think of gender-affirming healthcare in a different way, why we think about it more as like driving or marriage, is because we don't easily see the medical necessity. But for trans folk who are undergoing it, you can be damn sure we see the medical necessity of it. For sure. So it's not like driving or marriage, but it is like any other medical intervention. Yeah, children, young people are making big decisions about their bodies, yes. And their parents are helping them, and their doctors are helping them, and they need to make informed decisions. But to take those decisions away doesn't prevent permanent changes. To take those decisions away doesn't remove the medical need. It just means it's unmet. Surely leaving medical needs unmet is not what a civilized society does. Well, at least not those with universal healthcare. How do you feel about IVF and navigating that realm if you wish to have children? I don't want to have kids particularly. I was reading Sean Fay's book, and Sean was talking about when you're a trans girl, it's a complicated situation because everyone's like, oh, when are you having kids? When's the big, children round the corner, And there's a compulsion. You feel that pull for the first time as a trans girl, like all women do, that, oh, you're going to have kids though, right? And your value is in motherhood. And I'm not suggesting there is not value in motherhood. Of course there is. Being a parent is a beautiful, wonderful thing for people who want it. But for those who don't or can't, as I am both, right? Like before I transitioned, I looked into, freezing sperm, right? And I went, it was incredibly embarrassing. They're like, you need to deposit a specimen while I'm in full girl, But when they analyzed my specimen, they found that I was infertile entirely, to the point where I would have only been eligible for the highest level of proper full IVF. And that's before transition. Then when I transitioned, obviously I became infertile fully, and I can't be, I can't have my own children, right? That's just the way it is. I can't have my own kids. Now, I don't think that's a problem. Like if I wanted to have kids, there are options, I think IVF should be free to trans couples if they want them, for sure. Should be freaking free to everybody who needs it. Like, are you kidding me? Why? What? I think the only reason people get hesitant is because they see trans people as making a decision to transition. But trans people don't make a decision to transition. They give in. They let go of their extraordinary effort not to, right? To try to fit into a heteronormative, cis-normative society, into society's expectations of what a man and what a woman is supposed to be. They're working extremely hard to fit into those expectations and try and stay hidden. And then they just stop because they're going to die if they keep doing it. It's not a question of like the decision to transition and make a decision to transition. I just stopped trying not to. And of course, I needed medical help to actually do the transition. I made the decision to take hormones for sure. But like at that point, I'm a girl. I need estrogen in my body. It's only natural. So yeah, I do think people should be able to have IVF to have children. I think that should be a possibility to everyone. I don't think being trans makes that any less valid. Even if we give up our fertility willingly, the fact that we have to give up our fertility is really like a failure of medicine more than anything else, right? Like the research hasn't been done. We don't have any treatment options, bearing in mind, right, that still to this day, I'm still using estrogen that is off-label for me, right? I read all the warnings, I read all the contraindications and the cautions, and they're all for postmenopausal women. I'm not a postmenopausal woman. I'm a trans woman, but they don't make drugs for me. They don't make any drugs for me. They don't even tell me what my blood test should show. I just had a blood test the other day. I'm going to ask for the results on Monday. They haven't called me, so I don't think there's anything concerning, but I'm going to ask them. They're going to tell me my estrogen numbers, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to be my own goddamn doctor. I'm going to find out from ChatGPT what my estrogen levels should be, and I'm going to compare the two. Should trans women's estrogen levels be different to cis women's? Nobody knows. What happens if transgender women's estrogen is a bit higher? Is there a risk of breast cancer? Who knows? Is there a risk of thromboembolic events if you are not taking oral estrogen, if you're using patches? The risk supposedly goes down. But what about for trans women? Nobody knows because nobody's doing the research. I'm taking these drugs off label because they don't even make drugs for us. So, there's just no research being done. We need to do more research, clearly. We need to fund more research to understand and to try and give trans people an actual freaking set of healthcare options purely created for them, with drugs designed for their bodies to do what it needs to do, and regimens that are designed for them, and contraindications and cautions so they can make informed decisions. It's amazing to me we still don't really have that. So IVF, yes. The same as for any other couple, yes. Should absolutely have access to IVF if they need it, if they want it. Me? I don't want it. I'm an educational psychologist. I don't really like children. I've met some kids I do really like. I do really like some kids. And I enjoy spending time with my nieces and nephews, of which I have many now. Some of which in their 20s, some of whom are in their teens, some of whom are in their single digits. Still, I love spending time with all of them. And I really, really, really love spending time with, with all of them. But I don't really want my own. And now I have multiple sclerosis. So, now I need to sleep more and I need to rest a lot and I need to recover a lot so that I can do my job and have a podcast and, have a blog, Rolling for Initiative, and all these things that I do, and play D&D and have a life, which I don't think I could have if I had kids. Because if I had kids, I'd be spending every moment trying not to get sick. Because if I get sick, I get brain damage. Welcome to multiple sclerosis. And if I get tired because I don't sleep, I get exacerbations and things get worse. If I'm stressed, triggers relapses. So let's not have kids. Kids are a really bad idea for me. And I don't really want them. So probably shouldn't have them. Especially if I don't want them. These are really cool. Really good questions. Dispel the myth about gender affirming care. Much of these questions are the ones that keep going up within religious circles. Listen, is there a message that I could leave you with, like one big message? When I was in the States and Beck bought me a makeup tutorial with a professional makeup artist, my first ever, my only ever. Right now, I use the skills he taught me. That act was one of the first major acts of affirmation I had ever really received. I didn't appreciate it as such at the time. I was like, I don't need that on my makeup. Are you kidding me? I absolutely did. But ever since, in the years that have followed, like a decade has passed now, I always look back on that and think that was a fucking cool thing to do. And we went out to a party that night, spent time with a bunch of people just as me. First time I got to be me, and I still had my boy voice and my boy name, but I was full girl. It was the first time I'd been able to breathe, maybe in my whole life. I'm an elder trans person now. I'm a freaking elder trans person now. And I get to just be out there and people seeing me in the street in my freaking wheelchair, hearing me speak at events, get to see a disabled trans person in the world and know. The people who are like my undergraduate students get to see a disabled trans person who's successful in the world and know maybe some of that is possible. Regardless of what J.K. Rowling and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and James Esses and whoever else wants to comment on gender diversity, even though none of them are gender diverse themselves, right? Oh, freaking cisgender folk, of course they are. Because transgender folk know who we are and we know what we need and we'll fight for it. We're damn sure we can fight for it. The message I want to leave, I think, is that I still now can't believe I get to live this life. And I'm going to earn it. With multiple sclerosis, I know that my time is limited. I know that tomorrow isn't a given. Any day I could have a relapse which steals my ability to speak, or my vision, or paralyzes me, or any number of a million other, torturous experiences it could visit upon me. So I know that my time is limited, but I'm going to live with the time that I have. And you know what? I fucking love it. And this is the thing, J.D. Vance and J.K. Rowling and everyone else who's out there concerned about transgender people, these transgender people, or whoever it was, using the T word for our community, just this worst trans epithet, this pejorative bullshit in high houses of power in public. What none of these people seem to realize is that we are here, we are real, and we are valid, and we are not going anywhere. And if people could see that, maybe they could see that if they could just see the joy in our hearts, maybe they could realize that we could create a world where everyone could find a place to belong. Thanks so very much for joining me. Cheers for the questions. Really good questions, by the by. Thanks very much for joining me. I'm your host, Cora, for this most strange little self-interview. Yes, super weird. What was I doing? Thanks for the questions, though. And hey, this is Classroom Psychology. I'm your host, Cora. You are very, very welcome here. And I look forward to seeing you, as always, in the next one.